Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was a Jujutsu Sorcerer and built a harem with Maki, Nobara, and Mei Mei? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Son of Shinjuku. The air in the Sumitomo building was wrong. It wasn't just the stale, recycled oxygen of a skyscraper on lockdown, but a deeper sickness that clung to the back of the throat like rot. The walls sweated a black, viscous residue, and the fluorescent lights on the 48th floor flickered with a tremor that had nothing to do with the power grid. Reality here was thin, stretched taut over a tumor of cursed energy. Kugasaki, report. Megumi Fushigiro's voice was a strained hush from the far end of the warped corridor. His divine dog, a ghostly white wolf of shadow, whined low in its throat. Its fur bristling at an enemy it couldn't fully perceive. Same as the last 3 times you asked, Fushigiro, Nobara Kugasaki snapped, her hammer held tight in a white-knuckled grip. It's everywhere and nowhere. It's playing with us. She knelt, pressing a hand to the distorted marble floor. The texture was like cooled tar. This whole floor is its domain. Or close to it. They were supposed to be evacuating the last of the civilians, a simple grade 2 mission. But the curse had been misrepresented. Grossly. This was a grade 1, maybe higher, and it was intelligent. It had sealed the floor, not with a barrier, but by twisting space itself into a nauseating labyrinth of dead ends and looping hallways. The 2 civilians they were after were already gone, their fading screams abso. RBED into the very structure of the building. A ripple of movement in the corner of her eye. Nobara reacted instantly, driving a nail into the wall with a sharp crack of her hammer. Resonance. The cursed energy flared, but instead of striking a solid target, it fizzled. The wall dissolved into a swarm of chittering, mouth-like insects made of shadow, which scattered before the technique could fully connect. They swarmed toward her. Demon dogs. Megumi commanded. His twin wolves, one black, one white, lunged, tearing through the swarm, but for every shadow insect they ripped apart, 2 more seemed to boil out of the walls. This is getting old, Nobara grunted, slamming another nail home, this time into a piece of her straw doll linked to the first nail. The resulting explosion of cursed energy cleared a wider radius but did nothing to the source. They were being bled dry. The curse was treating them like a cat treats a mouse, enjoying the chase, savoring the slow drain of their energy and hope. Suddenly, a new presence entered the corridor. It wasn't a sound, or a footstep, but a change in the quality of the air. The oppressive, cloying sickness lessened, replaced by something clean and warm. Like the first rays of sun after a long, cold night. Naruto Uzumaki rounded the corner, his hands in the pockets of his standard-issue Jujutsu high uniform. His bright blonde hair seemed to defy the gloom, and his blue eyes, calm and analytical, swept the scene. He wasn't radiating power in the brash, overwhelming way Gojo Satoru did. His was a quiet, constant hum of energy, a steady flame in a world of shadows. Having fun, you too? He asked, his voice even. Nobara scowled, but the tension in her shoulders eased fractionally. About time, you idiot. Where have you been? Sightseeing. Checking the perimeter, Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the far end of the hall where the darkness seemed to coalesce. It sealed the entire floor into a pocket dimension. No way out unless we exorcise the core. As he spoke, the wall to his left bulged outward, warping like heated plastic before a spear of obsidian hard cursed energy shot out, aimed directly at his head. He didn't flinch. His right hand came out of his pocket, palm open. A disk of pure, golden light, no bigger than a saucer, materialized in front of him. The spear struck it and didn't shatter or bounce off. It simply dissolved. It turned to inert dust that glittered in the light of Naruto's shield before vanishing. There was no explosion, no concussive force. Just a quiet, absolute negation. It's fast, Naruto noted, his eyes narrowing. The light shield dissipated, and it attacks from surfaces. Megumi, can you track its energy source through the shadows? It's too diffuse, Megumi replied, his own concentration strained. The black wolf at his side was now bleeding shadow, a sign of significant damage. It's infused itself with the entire structure. It's like trying to find a single drop of poison in a lake. Then we'll just have to boil the lake, Nobara declared, loading another nail. No. Conserve your energy, Naruto commanded, his tone shifting from casual to commanding. It wants us to burn ourselves out. We're going to give it a single, concentrated target. He looked at them. Me. Before they could argue, he took a step forward, and the ambient warmth around him intensified. The flickering lights overhead stabilized, now glowing with a steadier, golden hue. The black residue on the walls began to steam and recede, pulling away from him as if recoiling from a fire. It doesn't like his energy, Megumi murmured, a hint of awe in his voice. He had seen it before, but never this pronounced. Curses were born of negative emotion. Naruto's cursed energy, if it could even be called that, was the polar opposite. It was pure, unfiltered positive energy, a fundamental anomaly in the world of Jujutsu. The curse seemed to agree. The chittering of the shadow insects grew frantic, desperate. The entire corridor began to constrict, the walls groaning as they closed in. From the ceiling, a dozen more obsidian spears materialized, all aimed at the defiant spot of warmth in their world. Naruto, Nobara yelled. He raised a hand, not in defense, but as a conductor leading an orchestra. Stay behind me. Golden light bled from his skin. It wasn't a blinding flash, but a gentle, inexorable bloom. A dome of energy expanded from him, meeting the constricting walls. The moment the corrupted structure touched the light, it hissed and disintegrated into harmless motes. The rain of spears fell, and as they entered the dome, they evaporated into nothing, their malevolent energy purified on contact. Inside the golden sanctuary, the air was warm and smelled of ozone and sunshine. Nobara and Megumi could feel their own cursed energy reserves being soothed, the drain on them halting. What is this? Nobara whispered, staring at the translucent golden barrier. A breathing room, Naruto said simply. He was scanning the disintegrating walls, his eyes tracking something they couldn't see. It's panicking. It's pulling all its energy back to a central point for a final attack. It thinks it can overwhelm me with sheer volume. He pointed to a spot on the floor 30 feet away, where the shadows were now churning like a whirlpool of ink. There, Megumi, get ready to pull Nobara out. This will get loud. What about you? Megumi asked, already forming the hand sign for new. The floor beneath Naruto's feet cracked as the building itself began to rebel against the curse's influence, shedding the corruption. I'm the one it wants. The whirlpool of shadow erupted. It wasn't a spear this time, but a colossal, vaguely humanoid shape that filled the entire corridor. It had too many joints. Its limbs bending at sickening angles, and a maw that opened into a void of screaming faces, the echoes of its previous victims. It let out a shriek that was a physical force, cracking the golden dome of light. Megumi grunted, his knees buckling under the psychic pressure. Nobara clutched her head, a scream caught in her throat. The sheer malice was overwhelming. But Naruto stood firm, the epicenter of the storm. He held his ground as his dome shattered, the wave of negative energy washing over him. It was like watching a tsunami crash against a lighthouse. The curse lunged, its multi-jointed arms swinging down like a wrecking ball. It was faster than anything they had seen, a blur of concentrated despair. It was aiming for Megumi. Megumi, Nobara cried out, but she was too far, too slow. Time seemed to slow. Naruto moved. He wasn't just fast, he was instantaneous. One moment he was in front of them, the next he was between the descending claw and Megumi, his back to his friend. He didn't raise a shield. He didn't dodge. He took the hit. The impact was sickening. The claw, sharp enough to rend steel, slammed into Naruto's shoulder. But it didn't tear through. The cursed energy of the attack sizzled and evaporated on contact with his body, but the physical force was still immense. Naruto's feet dug trenches in the marble floor as he was driven back several feet, shielding Megumi completely. He grunted, a sharp exhalation of pain. The fabric of his uniform was torn, but the skin beneath, though bruised, was unbroken. Wisps of golden energy, like steam, were already knitting the damaged tissue together. You hurt my friend, Naruto said, his voice dangerously quiet. He looked over his shoulder, first at Megumi, who was staring, wide-eyed, then at the monstrous curse. The calm, analytical light in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, searing fire. Big mistake. He raised his right hand. The air began to vibrate. Energy, raw and immense, gathered in his palm. It wasn't the violent, crackling chaos of a black flash. It was a silent, terrifying compression. A miniature star, a perfect sphere of swirling, golden light, spun into existence, humming with a pow. That made the very atoms in the air sing. It illuminated the entire floor, casting out every shadow, revealing the true, pathetic form of the curse, a twisted, cowering thing of hate and fear. Rasengan, Naruto whispered, but the word was just for him. The technique was his own unique application of his power. He called this one the solar flare. He pushed off the floor, a golden comet in the ruined hallway. The curse shrieked, trying to retreat, to dissolve back into the walls, but there was nowhere to run. The light was everywhere. Naruto slammed the sphere of sunfire into the curse's chest. There was no explosion, no sound. For a single, eternal moment, there was only light. An absolute, blinding, purifying light that filled their vision. Nobara and Megumi felt a wave of impossible warmth wash over them. A feeling of such profound peace that it was almost painful. It was the feeling of a nightmare ending, of a fever breaking, of a great weight being lifted from the soul. And then, it was over. The light receded, pulling back into Naruto, leaving no after-image. The corridor was still. The monstrous curse was gone. Not exorcised, not banished. Gone. There was no residue, no fading cursed energy. No trace it had ever existed. The very air it had occupied was now clean, pure. Even the physical damage to the building seemed less severe, the black ooze and twisted metal simply gone, leaving behind clean, if broken, concrete and steel. Naruto stood in the center of the hall, his hand still outstretched. The torn fabric on his shoulder was already mended by his uniform's own properties, and beneath it, his skin was flawless. He wasn't even breathing heavily. He lowered his arm and turned, the cold fire in his eyes fading back to his usual calm. "You okay, Megumi?" he asked, his voice returning to normal. Megumi could only nod, pushing himself up. He looked at the spot where the Grade 1 had been. There was nothing. It was the most complete exorcism he had ever witnessed. It wasn't a victory, it was an erasure. Nobara finally found her voice, a mixture of awe and her usual bravado. "Show off. You could have just led with that and saved us the trouble." Naruto offered a small, tired smile. "And miss all the fun. Besides," he added, his expression turning serious, "that takes a lot out of me. It's not something I can just throw around." It was a lie, or at least a half-truth. They all knew it. The true reason was control. Unleashing that kind of power was dangerous, and Naruto was always in control. He never used a cannon to kill a fly. But today, the fly had threatened his friends. And so he had brought out the sun. As Megumi finally got to his feet, assisted by his now reformed demon dog, the unnatural silence was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. Fast, professional. A squad of 4 sorcerers rounded the corner, weapons drawn, clad in different uniforms. Kyoto Jujutsu High. They had been called as backup when the threat level was reassessed. Leading them was a tall, athletic girl with dark hair pulled into a tight ponytail, her face set in a permanent scowl of determination. She wore glasses, and cradled in her arms was a massive 3-sectioned staff bound in cloth. Maki Zenin. Her eyes, sharp and analytical, took in the scene in a second. The 3 Tokyo students, looking worn but alive. The state of the corridor, structurally damaged but spiritually clean. Unnaturally clean. She could feel the lingering warmth in the air, the complete and total absence of any cursed energy signature. It was like walking into a street, aerolyzed operating room after a bloodbath. There was no trace of the patient or the disease. Her gaze swept past Nobara's defiant stance and Megumi's weary posture, landing squarely on Naruto. He was the only one who looked completely untouched by the battle. He was the source of the strange, lingering energy. "The threat has been neutralized," Maki stated, her voice flat and businesslike. "It wasn't a question. Just finished up," Naruto replied easily, giving a slight wave. "Thanks for coming all this way, though. Appreciate the thought." Maki's eyes narrowed. This was the boy Gojo Satoru had brought in. The special case from outside the clans. The rumors about him were wild, contradictory. Some said he was the vessel of some ancient cursed spirit. Others said he was a freak of nature, a heavenly restriction in reverse. Blessed with infinite cursed energy but no technique. All of it was clearly wrong. What she was sensing now was a technique of terrifying efficiency. One of her teammates, a lanky boy with a sheathed katana, stepped forward. We were told it was a special grade threat. It was. Nobara shot back, stepping protectively closer to Naruto. And we handled it. What? You wanted a piece? Maki ignored her, her focus remaining on Naruto. She unwrapped a small section of her weapon, revealing the dark, menacing metal of Playful Cloud, a special grade cursed tool. An exorcism that leaves no residual energy. That's not a normal technique. I'm not a normal guy, Naruto said with a shrug, his charisma a disarming shield. Maki didn't smile. She wasn't here to make friends. She was a warrior, and she had just walked onto a battlefield where a god-level weapon had been fired. Her instincts were screaming. She needed to understand it. I saw the result of your power, she said, her voice dropping lower. A challenge in her tone. Now I want to see the fighter. A thick silence fell over the corridor. Nobara bristled, about to launch into a tirade, but Naruto held up a hand to stop her. He met Maki's intense gaze, and for the first time, a genuine, interested smile touched his lips. He saw past the Zenin arrogance, past the Kyoto uniform. He saw the coiled strength in her stance, the calluses on her hands, the burning frustration in her eyes. He saw a fellow warrior, trapped by circumstance. All right, he said, the smile widening. I could use a good workout. Back at the school, tonight. Maki gave a sharp, single nod. The deal was struck. Her squad looked at her, confused, but she offered no explanation. She had found something far more interesting than a rogue curse in Shinjuku today. She had found an anomaly, and her entire being was desperate to measure its strength. Later that night, the city of Tokyo was a distant, glittering tapestry below the grounds of Jujutsu High. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding forest. In one of the sprawling wooden training grounds, two figures faced each other under the stark light of the overhead lamps. Maki had shed her uniform for simple training GI. In her hands, she wielded a long, bladed naginata, its steel edge gleaming. Naruto stood opposite her, wearing a simple black t-shirt and pants, his hands empty. You're not using a weapon? Maki asked, her voice laced with skepticism. Don't need one, Naruto replied, settling into a low, stable stance. And no cursed technique, just this. He tapped his temple, and these. He held up his fists. Maki's lips tightened into a thin line. It was either supreme confidence or supreme arrogance. She would find out which. Your funeral. Without another word, she moved. She didn't charge. She flowed. The naginata became an extension of her body, a whirlwind of deadly steel. The blade sliced through the air with a hungry hiss, aimed for his neck. Naruto leaned back, the blade passing a hair's breadth from his throat. He used the momentum of his dodge to pivot, his foot sweeping out to kick the base of the polearm. The impact was solid, but Maki's grip was like iron. She absorbed the force, spun with it, and reversed her grip, bringing the butt of the weapon around in a crushing arc aimed at his ribs. He brought his forearm up to block. The sound of the impact was like a tree branch snapping. Naruto slid back a foot, his arm numb, but he held his ground. Her physical strength was immense, a product of her heavenly restriction. He could feel it, a dense, powerful force far beyond that of a normal sorcerer. Not bad, he grunted, a flicker of respect in his eyes. I'm just getting started, she shot back. The spar intensified. It was a beautiful, brutal dance. Maki was grace and precision, a master of reach and angles. She attacked relentlessly, seamlessly switching between the blade, the shaft, and the butt of her naginata. Keeping him constantly on the defensive. She was trying to overwhelm him, to find an opening in his guard. But Naruto was a rock. He was not as elegant, but his instincts were preternatural. He moved with a grounded, powerful economy, his blocks perfectly timed, his dodges minimal. He wasn't just defending, he was learning. He was absorbing her patterns, her rhythm, the subtle shifts in her weight before each strike. He was weathering the storm, waiting for his moment. After a solid minute of her relentless assault, he found it. She lunged with a powerful thrust. Instead of blocking or dodging, Naruto stepped into the attack. It was a suicidal move. The blade was aimed right for his heart. At the last possible second, he dropped his body, the spearhead skimming over his shoulder. His left hand shot up, not to grab the blade, but to slap the flat of it, deflecting its trajectory upward. Simultaneously, his right hand clamped down on the wooden shaft. He had closed the distance. He was inside her reach. Maki's eyes widened in surprise. No one was that fast, that reckless. She tried to pull the weapon back, but his grip was unshakable. He yanked, using her own strength against her, pulling her off balance and towards him. His fist flew, not at her face, but at her shoulder, a precise, controlled strike. She twisted away, avoiding the brunt of it, but the foe. RCE was still enough to make her gasp and stumble back, her hold on the naginata finally broken. The weapon clattered to the wooden floor. They stood panting, sweat beading on their brows. "You're strong," Naruto said, his voice genuine. "Incredibly strong. Your physical prowess is off the charts." Maki narrowed her eyes, flexing her stinging shoulder. "You're not just some freak with a powerful technique. You can actually fight." The respect in her voice was grudging, but it was there. "Had to learn," he said. "Power is useless without the skill to wield it." He gestured to the fallen naginata. Again, she smirked, a rare, fierce expression that lit up her face. "This time, I won't go easy." She discarded the naginata and drew two short swords from a rack on the side. The second round was even faster. A close quarters flurry of steel and flesh. It was a blur of motion, parries, dodges, and strikes. Naruto was forced to move more, his brawler style adapting to her dual-wielding assault. He took cuts, shallow slices on his arms and torso that healed almost as fast as they were inflicted, fine lines of red closing into white scars before vanishing, his passive healing a side effect of his very nature. He was landing hits, too. A solid punch to her gut that she took with a grunt, a leg sweep that she flipped out of with breathtaking agility. They were perfectly matched in a strange, asymmetrical way. Her skill and weapons against his durability and raw, predictive instinct. The spar ended when they were both exhausted, locked in a stalemate. She had a training knife pressed against the side of his neck. Her breath coming in ragged gasps. He had her wrist in a crushing grip, his other hand hovering an inch from her face, palm open, a faint warmth beginning to gather there. If she moved, he could end it. If he moved, her blade would cut deep. "Draw," he breathed, a wide, genuine grin spreading across his face. Maki held his gaze for a long moment before slowly, reluctantly, pulling her knife away. She slumped, her shoulders finally relaxing. "If you had used your technique, I would have lost in the first second. And if I didn't have my technique, you'd have beaten me bloody in the first 10. He countered, offering his hand. "Your skill with cursed tools is the best I've ever seen. You're a true warrior, Maki." She stared at his outstretched hand. He wasn't just saying it. He meant it. He wasn't looking at her as a member of the Zenin clan, or as a girl with no cursed energy. He was looking at her as an equal, a fighter he respected. Slowly, she took his hand. His grip was firm, warm. "Naruto," she said, her voice quiet. It was the first time she had used his name. "Maki," he replied with a nod. An understanding passed between them, silent and profound. It was the birth of a bond forged not in attraction or convenience, but in the fires of combat and mutual, hard-won respect. Miles away, in the now cordoned-off Sumitomo building, a lone figure walked the 48th floor. Gojo Satoru, his blindfold off, let his six eyes take in the scene. The student's reports had been clinical, but his senses told a far more vivid story. He could perceive the faintest echoes of what had happened. He saw the ghost of Megumi's demon dogs, the fading sparks of Nobara's resonance. But where the Grade 1 curse had been, there was a hole. A perfect, clean void in the fabric of cursed energy. Naruto's power didn't leave echoes. It erased the page entirely. Terrifying, Gojo murmured to himself, a playful smile on his lips that didn't quite reach his eyes. And he's still holding back. He knelt down, near the spot where Naruto had unleashed his final attack. He ran a hand over the smooth, clean floor. Most sorcerers saw only concrete. His six eyes saw the very flow of energy. The history of the space. And he saw something else. Something left behind not by Naruto, but by the curse. As the curse was being atomized, its primal terror and its very essence had been momentarily branded onto the physical world by the sheer force of Naruto's technique. It was an imprint, visible only to him. Faint, almost imperceptible, was a small, sigil-like carving etched into the foundation. It was a simple, elegant shape, a seven-pointed star. Gojo's smile vanished. He had seen that symbol before, but not in his lifetime. He'd seen it in the most ancient, forbidden texts of the Jujutsu world. Texts that spoke of the time before curses, before humanity. Texts that spoke of a primordial darkness, an entity of pure silence and void. He traced the outline of the star with his finger. Before being erased, the curse had shrieked, not in pain, but in what sounded like a prayer. The students hadn't understood the words, but Gojo's 6 eyes had deciphered the residual energy. The cold, hungry stars are coming. The great silence will reclaim all. Gojo stood up, his expression grim. The attack on Shinjuku wasn't random. The appearance of a grade 1 was not a miscalculation. It was a probe, a test. They were testing the defenses. And they had found something they hadn't expected. They had found a sun in the darkness. Now, the darkness knew where to look. The game had just changed. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Garden of Vipers. The news of the Shinjuku incident did not just spread, it detonated. In the cloistered, rumor-choked halls of the Jujutsu world, an event of that magnitude, a confirmed grade 1 curse and its entire domain being erased without a trace, was a seismic shock. The after-action reports were stark, clinical, and utterly unbelievable. They spoke of a power that did not exorcise but purified, a cursed technique that behaved like its conceptual opposite. The name Naruto Uzumaki, once a whispered curiosity attached to Gojo Satoru, became a subject of intense, fearful debate overnight. The first tremor of the fallout arrived at Tokyo Jujutsu High 3 days later. It came in the form of a black, unmarked car that was far too expensive for a government vehicle. And 2 men in immaculate, traditional black kimono whose posture was so rigid they seemed carved from obsidian. They did not request entry, they presented themselves at the gate as an inevitability. Gojo met them in the main reception hall, a space of ancient, shadowed wood that seemed to reject the very notion of modern haste. He was slouching against a support pillar, a box of kikufuku in his hand. "To what do we owe the pleasure, gentlemen?" he chirped, his voice echoing with feigned delight. "Lost. The annual stuffy old man convention is 2 prefectures over." The elder of the 2 men, his face a roadmap of scowls, bowed a stiff, precise 90 degrees. "Gojo-sama, we come on behalf of the Zenin clan. Naobito-sama extends a formal invitation to the main house in Kyoto." "An invitation? How sweet," Gojo said, popping a mochi into his mouth. "I'm afraid I'm terribly busy. I have to count all the ceiling tiles. It's a very important, very secret mission." The man's eye twitched. "The invitation is not for you. It is for your student, Naruto Uzumaki." He paused, letting the weight of the name hang in the air. "And as she is currently on loan to your campus, the invitation is also extended to our clan's daughter, Maki Zenin. We feel it is past time she returned home for a family reunion." The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. The casual disrespect vanished from Gojo's posture. It was a power play, as subtle as a sledgehammer. They were using Maki as leverage, a guarantee that Naruto would comply. They wanted to see the new piece on the board, to measure him. And they were using their own unwanted daughter as the leash. "I see," Gojo said, his voice losing all its mirth. His 6 eyes, even behind the blindfold, were processing the implications. The myriad branching futures of this decision. He could refuse. He could tell the great Zenin clan to go to hell. But that would be a loud, messy declaration of war. Or, he could let his prized student off the leash in their own backyard. An agent of chaos in the most rigid house of all. The potential for disruption was delicious. "We'll be there," a new voice said. Naruto stood in the doorway, flanked by a fuming Nobara and a stoic Megumi. He hadn't heard the whole conversation, but he'd heard enough. He'd heard Maki's name. His eyes, clear and direct, were fixed on the Zenin envoys. There was no defiance in his gaze. Just a simple statement of fact. "Naruto-kun, Gojo said, a slow smile spreading across his face. Are you sure? Their tea is dreadful, all bitter. They invited Maki, Naruto said simply. As if that explained everything. He looked at the envoys, his gaze unwavering. If you want to see me, fine. But you'll treat her with the respect she deserves as a grade 4 sorcerer of Tokyo Jujutsu High. That's my only condition. The younger envoy sneered. We know how to treat our own. That wasn't a request. Naruto cut him off, his voice flat and cold as deep water. The ambient warmth that always clung to him seemed to recede, leaving a pocket of sudden, sharp chill in the air. It was a flicker of the same pressure from the Shinjuku skyscraper, a promise of something immense held in perfect, dangerous check. The envoy physically recoiled, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of the tanto hidden in his kimono. Gojo clapped his hands together, the sound booming in the tense silence. Excellent. It's settled then. A field trip. I'll arrange your travel. Don't worry, he added, winking at Naruto, I'll make sure you get the VIP treatment. The envoys, flustered and unnerved, could only bow and retreat, their mission accomplished but their composure shattered. As they left, Nobara exploded. Are you insane? It's a trap. They're vipers, all of them. They hate Maki. They're going to try and dissect you. I know, Naruto said calmly. He knows, Gojo echoed, his smile widening. That's why it's going to be so much fun. Megumi, who had been silent, finally spoke, his gaze on Naruto. The Zenin clan doesn't issue invitations. They issue summons. Be careful. As a distant member of the clan himself, he knew better than anyone the darkness that resided there. I will be, Naruto promised. But his mind was already on Maki. He found her later, in the armory, polishing a wicked-looking poleaxe with furious, jerky movements. The air around her was thick with resentment. You don't have to come, she said without looking up, her voice tight. Tell Gojo to get stuffed. Tell them to get stuffed. And let you have all the fun. He asked, leaning against a weapon rack. She didn't respond, her knuckles white on the poleaxe's shaft. He softened his tone. Maki, I'm not going because they summoned me. I'm going because they dragged you into it. We're going together. She finally stopped, her shoulders slumping. She looked up at him, her eyes a maelstrom of anger, humiliation, and a flicker of something else, something fragile she tried desperately to hide. You don't get it, Naruto. To them, I'm garbage. A failure. A girl with no cursed energy from the great Zenin clan. It's a stain they can't wash out. Going back there, it's like showing off their shame. Then let's show them something else, he said, his voice low and steady. Let's show them your strength. She stared at him, searching his face for any hint of pity. There was none, only a calm, unwavering conviction. It was the same look he'd given her after their spar, a look of pure, unadulterated respect. Against her better judgment, a sliver of her defiance returned, reforged and sharper than before. Fine, she bit out, but when they try something, and they will, don't expect me to hold back. Wouldn't dream of it, Naruto said with a grin. The Zenin estate was not a home, it was a fortress of tradition. A sprawling complex of dark wood buildings, perfectly manicured gravel gardens, and high, oppressive walls that seemed designed to keep the world out and its inhabitants in. The air itself felt heavy, thick with centuries of pride, arrogance, and poison. It was a place built on rules, hierarchies, and the crushing weight of a name. To Naruto, it felt like a tomb. They were met in the main courtyard not by a servant, but by Ogi Zenin himself. Maki's father. He was a stern, severe man whose presence seemed to suck the warmth from the air. His eyes, cold and dismissive, flickered over Naruto for a brief, appraising moment before landing on his daughter. He didn't even acknowledge her return. The girl can go to her old quarters. Naobito-sama will see the boy in the grand hall, Ogi stated. His voice devoid of any emotion. The girl, the boy, not names, labels, possessions. Maki's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in her cheek. She was about to spit a reply, but Naruto stepped forward slightly, placing himself between her and her father. We're not being separated, Naruto said, his tone polite but non-negotiable. Maki stays with me. Ogi's eyes narrowed into slits. A lesser sorcerer would have flinched, but Naruto met his gaze without blinking. For a long, Tense moment, the two men stared each other down. It was OGI who broke contact first, letting out a quiet, tch, of disgust. As you wish, he said, turning on his heel. Follow me. Do not stray from the path. The grand hall was a vast, open space, its shoji screens painted with ancient battles. Its air thick with the scent of old wood and incense. Seated at the head of the room on a raised platform was Naobito Zenin, the 26th head of the clan. He was a wiry man with a handlebar mustache and eyes that glinted with sharp, alcoholic intelligence. He held a gourd of sake in one hand, and he appraised Naruto's arrival with the lazy interest of a man watching a bug crawl across his floor. Dozens of other clan members knelt on tatami mats on either side of the room, the elite. The members of the Hei, the clan's personal enforcement unit, were among them, their presence a silent, menacing promise. The collective weight of their stares was a physical pressure. So, Naobito slurred, taking a long drink from his gourd. This is Gojo's new pet. The one who cleans up messes so thoroughly. The words were drenched in sarcasm. They say you have a remarkable power. We are, of course, terribly curious. I'm just a student, Naruto replied, his posture relaxed, betraying no intimidation. Maki stood beside him, her back ramrod straight, her face a mask of iron control. Humble, too, Naobito chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. A rare quality. Well, you are our guests. Tonight, we shall feast in your honor. A celebration of new acquaintances. The feast was an excruciating affair. The food was exquisite, the sake was of the highest quality, but the atmosphere was suffocating. The conversation was a web of veiled insults, probing questions, and condescending remarks, all aimed at Naruto, and by extension, Maki. They asked about his family, his origins, his technique, all with a thinly veiled disdain for his lack of a prestigious lineage. Naruto answered with a placid, disarming honesty that seemed to frustrate them more than any clever retort would have. Maki was silent, a ghost at the table. They treated her as if she were invisible, her presence an acknowledged but unspoken embarrassment. The tension coiled tighter and tighter, a string stretched to its breaking point. The string snapped in the form of Junichi Zenin, a cousin known more for his brutish strength than his intellect. He was several flasks of sake deep, his face flushed. He slammed his cup down, the sound cracking the strained silence. Enough of this nonsense, he boomed, pointing a finger at Maki. Why is this even here? It's bad enough we have to suffer the existence of a talentless monkey who shames our bloodline. But to have her brought to the main house, paraded around with some no-name outsider. It's an insult. The room went deathly quiet. OGI did nothing, his face impassive. Naobito watched with a glint of amusement, curious to see what would happen. Maki's hands, hidden under the table, clenched into fists so tight her knuckles were white. Her mask was cracking, the humiliation and rage finally threatening to boil over. Naruto didn't look at Junichi. He didn't raise his voice. He simply placed his right hand flat on the dark, lacquered wood of the table. You're wrong, he said, his voice calm, yet carrying an edge that cut through the silence. And then, it happened. A soft, golden light bloomed from under his palm. It didn't flare, it spread. Veins of pure, silent light raced across the surface of the table like lightning captured in amber. They branched out, illuminating the grain of the wood, a beautiful, terrifying lattice of power. The light was warm, but the promise it carried was anything but. Every sorcerer in the room felt it, an ocean of cursed energy, impossibly vast and perfectly controlled, held on a razor's edge. The chatter, the breathing, everything stopped. Naruto's eyes, still not looking at Junichi, were fixed on Maki. You talk about her lack of talent, he continued, his voice still quiet, yet it filled the enormous hall. You measure strength in cursed energy. In inherited techniques you didn't even earn. You're blind. He finally turned his gaze to Junichi, and the drunken bravado on the man's face evaporated, replaced by a primal fear. Maki's strength is in her will. In her spirit. It's a strength she forged herself, through sweat and blood and pain. It's a strength that could level this entire room before any of you could even form a hand sign. He lifted his hand. The light vanished as silently as it had appeared. The table was just a table again, but the image was burned into the retinas of everyone present. Naobito was the first to break the spell. He let out a slow, appreciative chuckle. My, such passion, and such potential. He set his gourd down. The amusement was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating glint. Words are cheap, boy. You speak of strength. The Zenin clan only understands strength that is demonstrated. He stood up, his movements surprisingly fluid. The courtyard. You, against Mei Mei. And anyone else who feels their honor has been slighted. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a sentence. The training courtyard was a vast, sand-covered expanse, illuminated by blazing torches that cast long, dancing shadows. Naruto stood in the center. Opposite him stood not just the 5 members of the Hei, but another 10 Zenin elites, including a furious Jinichi. 15 of the clan's strongest fighters, all with grim, determined faces. This wasn't a spar. This was a public execution. Maki stood on the veranda with Naobito and the other clan elders, her hands clenched at her sides. She was forced to watch. A spectator to a battle being fought in her name. One last chance to beg, boy, one of the Hei members snarled. Naruto just smiled, a faint, dangerous curve of his lips. Let's get this over with. I want to see the gardens before it gets too late. The attack was instant and overwhelming. 3 sorcerers launched cursed techniques, blades of wind, spears of blood, while the rest charged, a wave of steel and killing intent. Naruto didn't move. Instead, he made a single hand sign, one unfamiliar to the Jujutsu world. A cross seal of his fingers. Shadow clone jutsu. With a series of smokeless puffs. 4 perfect duplicates of him appeared, flanking him. The Zenin fighters faltered for a half-second, confused by the unfamiliar technique. It was all the time Naruto needed. You 4, deal with the ranged attacks. The real Naruto commanded. The rest of you, with me. The battle was chaos, but Naruto was its calm center. His clones moved with a shared, single-minded purpose. 2 of them created shields of golden light, dissolving the incoming techniques with contemptuous ease. The other 2 clones, along with the real Naruto, met the charge. It was not a brawl. It was a dismantling. Naruto moved through the warriors like a surgeon. He didn't use any grand, flashy techniques. He used pure, unadulterated skill. An elbow to a wrist, disarming a swordsman. A precise chop to the neck of a sorcerer mid-incantation. Knocking him out cold. He flowed between them, his movements economical and devastating. His clones acted in perfect concert, one clone tripping a fighter into the path of another's disabling strike. They weren't just extra bodies, they were extensions of his tactical will. Jinichi, enraged, came at him with a massive iron club, roaring. Naruto simply sidestepped, grabbed the man's arm, and used his own momentum to flip him head over heels. Jinichi landed with a sickening crunch, his shoulder dislocated. In less than 2 minutes, it was over. 13 of the 15 Zenin elites were on the ground, disarmed, disabled, or unconscious. Only 2 of the Hei remained standing, back to back, horrified. Naruto and his clones stood untouched, the sand around them barely disturbed. From the veranda, a slow clap echoed. Naobito. Impressive, the clan head said, stepping down onto the sand. The remaining 2 Hei members scurried away. A very novel technique, but you've just been playing with children. He took a stance, a strange, jerky motion. Now, let's see how you handle a true master. Projection sorcery. Megumi had warned him about it. A technique. UE that presets 24 movements in a single second, turning the user into an untouchable, high-speed phantom. Naobito vanished. He reappeared to Naruto's left, his hand a rigid spear aimed at Naruto's neck. Naruto tried to block, but Naobito was already gone, his attack a mere feint. A kick landed squarely in Naruto's back, sending him stumbling forward. Naobito was already in front of him, a palm strike aimed for his chest. Naruto crossed his arms to block, but the blow was stronger than expected, infused with cursed energy. He was thrown back, skidding in the sand. The clan elders murmured, smug smiles returning to their faces. This was the power of their leader. Unbeatable, unpredictable. Naruto got to his feet, wiping a trickle of blood from his lip. He was smiling. I see. You're not actually fast. You're just forcing me to move in a predetermined path. A sequence of 24 frames per second. Naobito froze mid-stance, his eyes wide with shock. How? It's a clever trick, Naruto said, his body beginning to glow with a soft, golden aura. But it only works if the frames are clean. What happens if the air itself is full of static? He didn't create a shield or a weapon. He just released his energy. Not in a wave, but as a fine, glittering mist. Billions of tiny, harmless particles of light filled the courtyard, catching the torchlight like a cloud of dust motes. They were everywhere, a constant, shimmering haze. Naobito tried to move. He stuttered. His technique, which relied on tracing a path through empty space, was being disrupted. Each of the light particles was a micro-obstacle, a disruption in the frame. He couldn't complete a sequence. He took a jerky, unnatural step and froze, his body locked in place. He was a statue. Naruto walked calmly towards him, the sand crunching under his feet. He stopped directly in front of the paralyzed clan head. He raised his right hand, and in his palm, a perfect, swirling sphere of golden energy spun to life, a Rasengan. Its hum was the only sound in the dead silent courtyard. He pressed it gently against Naobito's forehead. It didn't burn him. It didn't harm him. But the sheer, condensed power radiating from it was absolute. It was a checkmate. The difference between us, Naruto said softly, is that my power is my own. I earned it. He looked past Naobito, his gaze finding Maki on the veranda. Just like her, he held the pose for a long, heavy moment. Then dissipated the Rasengan. The mist of light faded. Naobito collapsed to his knees, gasping, the paralysis broken. He was defeated. Not just beaten, but fundamentally understood and countered. The entire Zenin clan had witnessed it. Naruto turned and walked away from the clan head, his back to the defeated warriors, and headed straight for the veranda. He stopped in front of Maki, whose face was a mixture of shock, awe, and something else, something fiercely protective. I promised you the gardens, he said, offering her a small, tired smile. That night, the moon was a silver sickle in the sky, illuminating the Zenin clan's famous rock garden. It was a place of serene, cold beauty, a perfect representation of the clan's philosophy. Everything in its right place. Not a pebble out of line. Naruto sat on a polished stone bench, meditating. The warmth of his energy was a small, defiant island in the cold, controlled perfection of the garden. He heard a soft footstep on the gravel and opened his eyes. Maki stood there, having changed into a simple yukata, her hair down. She sat next to him, not too close, but not far either. For a long time, they were silent, listening to the sound of a distant water feature. Thank you, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. It was a phrase he suspected she rarely used. For what? He asked. I just won a fight. No, she said, shaking her head. You didn't just win a fight. You showed them. You showed them that everything they believe in, their bloodlines, their inherited techniques, it's not the only way. It's not the strongest way. She looked at him, her gaze intense. No one has ever stood up for me like that. Not ever. People either pity me or scorn me. You respect me. Of course I do, Naruto said, turning to face her more fully. Maki, my power, it's a gift, but it's also a cage. People see it, and they don't see me anymore. They see a weapon, an asset, a threat. It isolates me. He looked out at the garden. You're isolated for the opposite reason. But we're the same. We're both fighting against the boxes people try to put us in. He reached out and gently touched a strand of her hair. Your strength is real. It's yours. I don't respect you in spite of you having no cursed energy. I respect you because of it. Because I know how hard you had to fight to become who you are. That will, that fire, that's 1,000 times more valuable than some technique you're born with. Tears welled in Maki's eyes. She fought them, her pride warring with the overwhelming tide of emotion, but one escaped. Tracing a silent path down her cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He just let his presence be a steady, warm anchor in her turbulent world. She didn't need to be saved. She just needed someone to see her. And in that quiet garden, under the silver moon, she knew she had finally been seen. A bond, deeper than camaraderie, stronger than friendship, was forged in that shared silence. An unbreakable loyalty. Meanwhile, in a darkened, hidden chamber deep within the Zenin compound, an ancient, wizened elder who hadn't attended the feast knelt before a communications device, a cursed tool that could send messages without a trace. He was a member of a different clan, a far older and more secretive one than any of the Great Three. He was a member of the Equilibrium Council. His fingers, thin as twigs, moved with deliberate precision, tapping out a coded message. To the Council, subject codenamed Daybreak, has been observed. Power exceeds all projections. Control is absolute. Conceptual negation of cursed energy confirmed. Countered projection sorcery with an unknown, logic-based application of his technique. Mentality is stable but fiercely protective of allies. Unreceptive to traditional authority. He is a fundamental disruption to the balance. He is not just a powerful individual. He is a new law of nature walking in the world of men. He cannot be controlled. He cannot be swayed. Recommend immediate implementation of Containment Protocol 7. He sent the message, and the cursed tool crumbled to dust. The balance had been maintained for 1,000 years. Extremes of dark, and extremes of light, both were a threat. Gojo Satoru was a problem they had learned to manage. But this boy, this son in human form, he was a catastrophe waiting to happen. The ill that sticks out must be hammered down, no matter how bright it shines. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Crow and the Comet. The fallout from the Zenin incident was a quiet, suffocating blanket of Drea. For the higher-ups and a source of unending, riotous glee for the students of Tokyo Jujutsu High. The stories, whispered through back channels and embellished with every retelling, painted Naruto as a demon king who had single-handedly brought the proudest clan to its knees. Nobara reveled in it, recounting that mostly imagined details with theatrical flair to anyone who would listen. Megumi was more reserved, but the quiet respect in his eyes whenever he looked at Naruto was more telling than any boast. Maki, back at the Tokyo campus, was transformed. The chip on her shoulder was still there, but it was no longer the entirety of her being. It was now just one weapon in an arsenal fortified by a newfound, unshakable confidence. Naruto, for his part, treated the entire affair as if it were a mildly interesting weekend trip. He deflected praise, sidestepped questions, and spent most of his time trying to master the art of getting the vending machine to give him 2 drinks for the price of 1. His power was a part of him. Like an arm or a leg, using it to shatter the arrogance of a great clan was, in his mind, no different from using a key to open a stubborn lock. This period of relative peace was, of course, destined to be short-lived. The world of Jujutsu sorcery does not allow for long vacations. The new mission came directly from Gojo, who summoned Naruto to his office, a chaotic space that looked as if a library and a sweet shop had exploded. Maps, reports, and empty candy wrappers littered every surface. "I have a special job for you, Naruto-kun," Gojo announced cheerfully, spinning around in his chair. "A real head-scratcher. And you'll have a partner." Naruto eyed him warily. Gojo's special jobs usually involved something profoundly irritating or absurdly dangerous. "Who?" "The one and only Mei Mei," Gojo said, his grin widening. "She specifically requested you." Naruto blinked. Mei Mei, the grade 1 sorcerer famous for 2 things, her unparalleled reconnaissance ability using her crows, and her unabashed, all-consuming love for money. He'd seen her around the school, a striking woman with long, silver hair braided over one shoulder and an aura of supreme, untouchable competence. She was a freelancer, a mercenary in the Jujutsu world, her allegiance sworn only to the highest bidder. "Why?" Naruto asked. "Because," Gojo said, leaning forward and lowering his voice conspiratorially, "you, my boy, are currently the hottest stock on the market. The Zenin clan tried a hostile takeover and failed spectacularly. Now everyone wants a piece. Mei Mei, being the shrewd investor she is, wants to see the asset up close before she makes a bid." He waved a hand dismissively. "Plus, the mission is weird. It suits her skill set, and yours." The mission was, indeed, weird. Over the past month, a dozen high-profile individuals, financiers, politicians, artists, had vanished without a trace. No ransom notes, no signs of struggle. They simply ceased to exist. Their last known locations were all luxury establishments, high-end spas, exclusive resorts, private villas. The only common thread was a single, Cryptic phrase left on a security feed or a half-finished text message. Finally. Some peace and quiet. Jujutsu headquarters had flagged it as a potential cursed spirit case, but a subtle and intelligent one. The latest disappearance was 2 days ago, at a secluded, ultra-expensive hot spring resort nestled deep in the mountains of Hakone. The resort was now on lockdown, a veil of secrecy thrown over it by the local authorities, bought and paid for by the powerful families of the victims. They want this handled quietly, Gojo finished, handing Naruto a thin file. No property damage, no loud explosions. Finesse. That's Mei Mei's specialty. I want to see if it's yours, too. Naruto met Mei Mei at the base of the mountain, near a discreet helipad. She was leaning against a black sports car that probably cost more than the school's annual budget, dressed in her signature dark, form-fitting outfit. Her eyes, a piercing shade of blue, tracked him as he approached, a faint, calculating smile on her lips. She wasn't looking at a person, she was appraising a prize jewel. Naruto Uzumaki, she said, her voice a smooth, melodious purr. The rumors do not do you justice. The energy you radiate, it's like standing next to a private, portable sun. Utterly unique. The potential market value is staggering. Naruto offered a slight smile. Mei Mei-san, Gojo said you were good, but he didn't mention you started with a price appraisal. I appraise everything, Naruto-kun, she replied, pushing off the car. It's how I determine what's worth my time. And you, she circled him slowly, her gaze analytical, are very, very interesting. She stopped in front of him, close enough that he could smell the faint, clean scent of her perfume. Let's see if the performance matches the prospectus. The journey up to the resort was a verbal chess match. Mei Mei asked him questions. Not about his past, but about his future. His ambitions, his goals, his price. She spoke of power not in terms of strength, but of influence and capital. It was a language he wasn't used to. But he understood the intent. She was probing for weaknesses, for levers she could pull. He answered her with a simple, unadorned directness that seemed to intrigue her more than any clever evasion. He didn't want money. He didn't want power over others. He just wanted to protect the people he cared about. To a woman like Mei Mei, who saw the world as a series of transactions, this was the most baffling. And therefore most valuable, commodity of all, an incorruptible asset. The resort, the sanctuary of the silent stream, was beautiful and utterly eerie. Traditional wood-end buildings were connected by covered walkways over mossy rock gardens and steaming mineral pools. It should have been a place of profound peace. Instead, the silence was heavy, unnatural. It wasn't quiet, it was emptied. As they stepped through the main gate, a simple alarm bell Gojo had given Naruto, a cursed tool designed to resonate with his specific energy, gave a soft, warm chime. A barrier, Naruto said, his eyes scanning the area. But it's not a normal one. It feels welcoming. Mei Mei had already sent her crows ahead. They swooped and circled the resort, their minds linked to hers. The cursed energy is faint, almost non-existent, she reported, her eyes closed in concentration. But it's woven into the silence itself. This isn't a curse that attacks. It invites. They moved through the resort. A ghost town of abandoned luxury. A half-eaten plate of sashimi here, a dropped book there. It was like the Mary Celeste. People had simply vanished mid-activity. They found the room of the latest victim, a powerful CEO. Everything was in order, except for his phone lying on the tatami mat, the screen lit up with an unsent text. Finally, some peace and cool. They're tired, Naruto said, his gaze distant. The victims. They're all people who live high-stress lives. People who would pay anything for a moment of genuine peace. And our curse is the ultimate opportunist, Mei Mei added. It offers them exactly what they desire. Her eyes snapped open. One of my crows just found something. In the main onsen, the largest hot spring. The main onsen was a breathtaking sight, a huge, natural-looking pool surrounded by dark, smooth stones and bamboo, the steam rising into the cool mountain air. In the center of the pool, floating on the surface, was a small, black orb, no bigger than a fist. It pulsed with a faint, dark light, absorbing the sound and steam around it. That's the core, Naruto asked. It seemed too small, too weak. No, Mei Mei said, her voice grim. That's the lure. As she spoke, one of her crows, perched on a bamboo fountain, suddenly went still. Its cawing cut off mid-sound. It didn't fall. It just froze, a perfect statue, before crumbling into dust that was silently absorbed into the air. It's a trap, Mei Mei stated, her hand instinctively going to the handle of her massive axe. The entire resort is a domain. A passive one. It's been waiting for sorcerers. For beings with high cursed energy, to arrive. The silence in the area deepened. It was no longer just an absence of sound. It was an active presence, pressing in on them, trying to find purchase in their minds. A seductive whisper that promised an end to struggle, to conflict, to pain. Rest. Be still. Be quiet. It's a psychological attack, Naruto analyzed, his own mind a fortress against the suggestion. It preys on the desire for tranquility. It offers peace, but the price is oblivion. A clever curse, Mei Mei acknowledged. Brute force will be useless. If we attack that orb, we'll likely just feed it with our energy. She looked at him, a genuine challenge in her eyes. So, powerful boy, what's your brilliant plan? Your son seems a bit loud for a library. Naruto was silent for a moment, his eyes on the pulsing orb. He could feel it now, the subtle pull of the pocket dimension it served as a gateway to. A dimension of pure, silent, cold emptiness. He thought back to Naobito Zenin. To his projection sorcery, he hadn't overpowered it, he had understood and dismantled its logic. This was the same. You're right, he said. A big attack is what it wants. It's a predator that feeds on absence. It starves things of their energy, their sound, their life. We can't fight it on its own terms. He turned to her. You said your crows are linked to you, right? Like a sonar system. A slow, intrigued smile spread across Mei Mei's face. They are. Can they enter the pocket dimension if they let themselves be taken? He asked. Possibly, she said, catching on. But they would be consumed. Not if we overload the system before it can digest them, Naruto countered. I need you to map the dimension. Find its weakest points, its structural anchors. I don't need a perfect map, just a general layout. Quote. Mei Mei's smile widened. It was a bold, reckless, and brilliant plan. A plan that required perfect trust and synchronization between them. It was a high-risk, high-reward gamble. Her kind of plan. This will be expensive, Naruto-kun, she purred. I charge a premium for the loss of my precious crows. Win this, and I'll talk to Gojo about getting you a bonus. He shot back without missing a beat. Deal, she said instantly. She closed her eyes and sent a command to her flock. Dozens of crows descended upon the onsen, their cause a defiant symphony against the oppressive silence. They dove, one by one, at the black orb. As each crow touched the orb's event horizon, it vanished, silently taken. But through their shared consciousness, Mei Mei was getting flashes. Snapshots of the void within. It was a vast, cold, starless space. But it wasn't empty. It was held together by pulsing nodes of concentrated silence, the architectural pillars of the domain. I see them, she whispered. Her brow furrowed in concentration. 3 main anchors. It's a tripod structure. Unstable if one leg is kicked out. That's all I need, Naruto said. He took a deep breath. And the familiar golden warmth began to radiate from him. But he wasn't gathering it in his palm for a Rasengan. He was letting it suffuse his entire body, turning his skin into a vessel of light. The curse sensed the threat. The black orb pulsed violently. The very air around them began to shimmer as the pocket dimension tried to expand, to drag them in physically. A maw of pure nothingness. SS opened in the space above the onsen pool, a hungry vortex of silence. It's now or never, Naruto-kun. Mei Mei warned, the strain evident in her voice as she sacrificed more of her crows to keep the map clear. Naruto didn't create a blast. He didn't form a spear or a shield. He did something far more esoteric. He gathered all the positive, life-affirming energy he could muster, and he sang. Not with his voice. He released the energy as a pure, harmonic resonance. It was the opposite of the curse's silence. It was the sound of a living cell dividing, the hum of sunlight on a leaf, the vibration of a heartbeat. It was a wave of pure, conceptual life. He directed this wave of harmonic energy not at the orb, but at the coordinates Mei Mei was feeding him, the locations of the anchors within the void. The resonance passed through the portal, not as a destructive force, but as an invasive, corrupting one. Inside the dimension of absolute zero, it was like introducing a single, thriving bacterium into a sterile environment. The harmonic of life struck the first anchor of silence, and instead of destroying it, it overloaded it with a concept it couldn't process. The anchor didn't explode, it fizzled. Like a speaker trying to play a sound it wasn't designed for. The pocket dimension shuddered. A high-pitched whine, the first sound it had ever known, echoed from the portal. "It's working," Mei Mei exclaimed. "Second anchor," Naruto said, his teeth gritted. He was pouring an immense amount of energy into this, not as raw power, but as a finely tuned frequency. It required incredible concentration. He sent a second wave of harmonic life. The second anchor popped like a soap bubble. The pocket dimension began to violently collapse. Cracks of golden light, echoes of Naruto's power, spread across the surface of the void. The resort around them groaned, the illusion flickering as reality began to reassert itself. "The third one is retreating," Mei Mei yelled. "It's pulling all its energy back to a single point." The black orb in the pool dissolved, and from the vortex above, a creature of nightmare unfurled. It was long and serpentine, made of solidified silence, its skin the matte black of a starless night sky. It had no face, only a single, cold point of white light for an eye. This was the true form of the curse. A child of the void. A Hoshikui. It dove straight for Mei Mei. It recognized her as the immediate threat, the one guiding the attacks. Naruto was already moving. He appeared in front of her, a solid wall of light erupting from his body to meet the Hoshikui's charge. The impact was silent but immense. The creature's void-based form began to hiss and evaporate where it touched Naruto's shield. Mei Mei, protected behind him, didn't flinch. She watched, her analytical mind processing the scene. She saw the absolute certainty in his posture, the effortless way he wielded a power that could rewrite reality. She'd seen Gojo's godlike power, a force of nature that warped the world around it. This was different. This was a fundamental constant, a power that didn't bend the rules but was the rule. A law of existence that said, darkness ends here. The Hoshikui, realizing it couldn't break through, let out a psychic shriek that vibrated directly in their minds. It wasn't a sound, but a stream of pure, cold concepts. "Foolish flame, you cannot outshine the darkness that birthed you. The first star, Amatsu Mikabashi, will reclaim this noisy world for the great silence." The name struck a chord of primal terror deep within Naruto's own power, a dissonant note in his soul's song. Amatsu Mikabashi, the star of oblivion. The name felt ancient, final. "So you can talk," Naruto said, his voice cold. He pushed back, his light flaring. "Then you can scream." He dropped the shield and lunged forward, his hand wreathed in golden flames. He drove his fist into the Hoshikui's core, where its single white eye burned. This time, there was no finesse. It was pure, overwhelming exorcism. The creature of silence erupted in a flash of golden light, its form disintegrating into motes of purified energy that rained down into the onsen pool, turning the water into a shimmering, warm bath of light. The silence broke. The world came rushing back in. The chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves, the gurgle of the bamboo fountain. The heavy, oppressive weight on their souls vanished. It was over. Naruto stood panting, not from exhaustion, but from the psychic backlash of the creature's final message. That name, Amatsu Mikabashi. Mei Mei walked up beside him, her gaze fixed on the spot where the Hoshikui had been. "Well," she said, her voice a low, impressed murmur. That was certainly a performance worthy of a premium billing. She turned to him, and the calculating, appraising look in her eyes was gone. It was replaced by something else, something deeper. A mixture of profound respect and genuine, thrilling excitement. "I've seen power before, Naruto-kun," she said softly. "I stand beside the strongest in the world on a regular basis. But that was not just power. That was artistry." On the helicopter ride back, the mood had shifted. The verbal chess match was over. They spoke now as equals, as partners. She shared her intel on the movements of the great clans, on the political undercurrents of the Jujutsu world. He spoke of his own philosophy, his belief in a person's inherent worth beyond their power or name. She found his idealism naive, but she could not deny the absolute conviction with which he held it, or the power that backed it up. As they approached the lights of Tokyo, she turned to him, her expression serious. "I am a freelancer, Naruto-kun. My loyalty is a commodity I sell to the highest bidder, she stated. My partnership, that is something I give. I am offering you a permanent partnership. My crows and my axe are yours to command, whenever you should need them. It was a business proposal, phrased in her typical transactional language. But they both knew it was more than that. It was a declaration of allegiance. In a world of shifting loyalties and selfish motives, she was making a long-term investment. And my price, she added, a playful glint returning to her eyes. I'm sure we can work out a favorable contract, he replied, playing along, a warm smile on his face. I'm sure we can, she purred, her gaze lingering on him. The professional admiration now had a clear, undeniable spark of personal attraction. She had come to appraise an asset, but she had found something far more valuable. A force of nature she wanted to stand beside, not just for profit, but for the sheer, exhilarating thrill of the ride. She had seen the future, and she was absolutely certain that his was the winning side. As they landed, a new piece was set on the board. The son of Shinjuku, the hammer of the Zenin, now had the unwavering eyes of the crow watching his back. The strange, unconventional family Naruto was building without even realizing it had just gained its most cunning and strategic member. And deep in his mind, a name echoed, a cold counterpoint to the warmth of his victory. Amatsu Mikabashi, a star of oblivion, a new and terrifying enemy, one from the dawn of time, was now aware of him. The stakes of the game had just been raised to a cosmic level. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Under a Sky of Lies. The victory in Hakone, though quiet and officially unacknowledged, sent subtle ripples through the higher echelons of the Jujutsu world. Another high-level threat, another impossible victory for Naruto Uzumaki. The Equilibrium Council's file on him grew thicker, their secret meetings more frequent and more urgent. To the students, however, he was simply Naruto, the guy who could always be counted on and who, despite his terrifying power, still lost spectacularly to Panda in video games. Life at Jujutsu High settled into a tense normalcy. The first-year trio, Naruto, Nobara, and Megumi, trained, bickered, and went on the milk run missions typical for students. Maki, invigorated by her newfound freedom from the Zenin clan's shadow, pushed herself and everyone around her with a relentless ferocity. Her sparring sessions with Naruto becoming legendary for their intensity and the sheer amount of property damage they caused. Mei Mei became a more frequent, if always business-like, presence on campus. Ostensibly consulting with Gojo but always finding time for a strategic meeting with Naruto, her advice as sharp as her axe and her flirtations just as deadly. It was Nobara who brought up the festival. She burst into the common room, waving a brightly colored flyer she'd torn from a telephone pole in the city. The Setage Yaboro Ichi Summer Festival, she announced, as if proclaiming a royal decree. It's tonight. We're going. Megumi looked up from his book, his expression unimpressed. A festival? It's just a crowd of people and overpriced food. It's a cultural experience, you joyless ghoul, she retorted, smacking him on the head with the rolled-up flyer. It's about the atmosphere, the lights, the fireworks, the chance to wear a yukata and look amazing, which I will be doing. Her gaze then fell on Naruto, who was attempting to teach one of Megumi's demon dogs to shake hands. You're in, right Naruto? Don't let Captain Brooding here ruin it. Naruto looked up, the massive white wolf gently nibbling his fingers. A festival, huh, sounds fun. See, fun. Someone around here understands the concept. Nobara then rounded on Maki, who was meticulously cleaning Playful Cloud in the corner. You too, Maki-san, you're coming. Maki grunted without looking up. Crowds are a tactical nightmare. Too many variables. Oh, for the love of it's not a mission. It's a night off. Nobara threw her hands up in exasperation. We're sorcerers, not monks. We're supposed to be protecting the lives of normal people so they can enjoy things like this. What's the point if we never experience it ourselves? Her words, surprisingly profound, hung in the air. Naruto met Maki's gaze across the room. He saw the flicker of hesitation, the instinct to refuse, to stay in the world of weapons and training she understood. He knew that home, for her had never been a place of celebration. She's right, Maki, Naruto said, his voice gentle but firm. It's just one night. No curses, No clans, no training. Just takoyaki and fireworks. He offered her a small, encouraging smile. Come on, it'll be my treat. Maki held his gaze for a long moment, the sounds of her polishing cloth slowing. The earnestness in his eyes was disarming. It wasn't a command, or a plea, but a simple, open invitation. A chance at the normalcy she had always been denied. With a sigh that was part surrender, part reluctant curiosity, she set her weapon down. Fine, she conceded, but if I get stuck behind a slow-walking family, I'm not responsible for my actions. Nobara let out a triumphant whoop. Yes, Operation Force Feed Fun to brooding warriors is a go. The festival was a riot of life. A chaotic, vibrant symphony of sound, light, and smell that was the polar opposite of the sterile, controlled world they usually inhabited. The air was thick with the scent of grilled squid, sweet caramelized sugar, and the low thrum of thousands of people shedding their daily worries for a few hours of joy. Paper lanterns cast a warm, golden red glow over everything, turning the familiar city streets into a magical labyrinth. Nobara was in her element, a whirlwind of energy in a stylish blue yukata patterned with red spider lilies. She dragged them from stall to stall, her sharp tongue getting them extra helpings from one vendor and nearly starting a fight with another over the perceived quality of his candied apples. Naruto, ever the diplomat, smoothed things over with a charming smile and by paying double. Maki was a study in tense fascination. She wore a simple, elegant gray yukata, her hair tied up differently. Softer, she moved with her usual warrior's awareness, her eyes constantly scanning, but the hard edges of her vigilance were slowly being softened by the sheer, overwhelming normalcy of it all. She tried dango for the first time, her initial skepticism melting into a quiet, surprised enjoyment. She watched kids chasing each other with sparklers, a small, unreadable expression on her face. Naruto, in a plain black yukata, was the anchor for their group. He was effortlessly part of the crowd, yet distinct. He moved with an easy confidence, his laughter genuine. In as Nobara haggled fiercely for a goldfish she didn't want. He found a shooting gallery, and the stall owner, a grizzled old man, scoffed at their chances. 10 shots, kid. Knock down the big prize, it's yours, the owner grunted, pointing to a ridiculously oversized stuffed bear. Nobara went first, her aim thrown off by the cheap, misaligned sights of the cork gun. Maki, applying her combat precision, did better. But the corks lacked the velocity to knock the weighted target over. Then it was Naruto's turn. He picked up the rifle, and for a split second, the playful atmosphere around him sharpened. He didn't channel his daybreak energy in a way anyone could see, but he let a minuscule, perfectly controlled pulse of it flow into the cork as he loaded it. He fired. The cork shot out not with a soft pop, but with a sharp crack, striking the target dead center. The oversized bear didn't just fall, it was launched off its shelf and landed with a soft thud at their feet. The stall owner stared, his jaw slack. Nobara and Maki looked from the bear to Naruto, who just shrugged with a mischievous grin. Lucky shot. He handed the giant bear to Maki. For you, a trophy for braving the crowds. Maki stared at the absurdly large stuffed animal, a comical contrast to her usual arsenal of deadly weapons. She looked like she wanted to protest, to call it ridiculous, but a slow, genuine smile bloomed on her face, transforming her features. She hugged the bear tightly. Thanks, she murmured, her voice soft. Later, as they ate takoyaki on a small bridge overlooking a canal, Nobara nudged Naruto with her elbow. You cheated, didn't you? She whispered, nodding towards the shooting gallery. A magician never reveals his secrets, he whispered back, his eyes twinkling. Maki-san is actually smiling, Nobara observed. Her voice uncharacteristically soft. A real, actual smile. Not the, I'm about to disembowel you, kind. She looked at Naruto, her expression a mix of her usual bravado and something more vulnerable. You're good for her, for us. Before he could respond, she leaned in, her movements quick and decisive, and stole a piece of takoyaki from his container. But you're still an idiot who lets his guard down, she declared, chewing triumphantly. He just laughed, a warm, easy sound that blended with the festival's joyful noise. In that moment, surrounded by the vibrant chaos of human life, with these two fierce, complicated women beside him, he felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what he fought for. Not an abstract concept of saving the world, but this. These small, fleeting moments of peace and happiness. The unspoken affection between the three of them was a tangible thing, a comfortable warmth that settled in the space between them. They found a spot on a grassy bank to watch the fireworks, joining hundreds of other families and couples. Maki set her giant bear down beside her, using it as a backrest. Nobara leaned against his side, complaining about the humidity but making no move to pull away. The first firework went up with a piercing whistle, exploding into a shower of brilliant chrysanthemums against the velvet dark of the sky. The crowd gasped in collective delight. Another followed, and another, painting the night with impossible colors. It was beautiful, it was perfect, and then the sky began to lie. Mixed in with the ascending fireworks were other lights. Small, fast, and cold. They didn't explode into flowers of color. They streaked across the sky like malevolent shooting stars, their trajectories not up, but down. Maki was the first to react, her body tensing. "Naruto," she said, her voice low and sharp. "Those aren't fireworks." Naruto was already on his feet, his eyes narrowed. The warmth of the festival was instantly replaced by a familiar, sickening chill. He could feel it now. Dozens of malevolent cursed energy signatures, plummeting towards the city. "Hoshikui," he breathed, the name a curse. "The children of the void." The first one landed. It struck a building a few blocks away, the impact not an explosion, but an implosion of silence and darkness. The happy chatter of the crowd faltered, replaced by confused murmurs. Then another landed in the park nearby, and the screams began. Panic erupted. The festive crowd turned into a stampede of terror, a wave of human fear that was a feast for the newly arrived curses. "This is a coordinated assault," Maki yelled over the chaos, her hand already reaching for a concealed combat knife in her yukata's sleeve. "They're targeting the civilians," Nobara shouted, her hammer and nails appearing in her hands as if by magic. "The negative energy from the panic is making them stronger. Split up," Naruto commanded, his voice cutting through the noise. "Maki, clear a path to the west. Get those people out of the park. Nobara, east side, target the ones feeding on the panic. I'll take the center." They didn't hesitate. They were a unit. With a shared, determined nod, they broke apart. Three sorcerers disappearing into a sea of screaming civilians. Naruto became a blur of golden light. He moved through the chaos, not as a fighter, but as a savior. He met a clone to lift a collapsed food stall off a trapped child, another to create a light barrier to shield a fleeing family from a Hoshikui's void blast. His primary focus wasn't exorcism, it was damage control. But the Hoshikui were numerous, and they were more aggressive than the one in Hakone. They were lesser forms, but they were vicious, tearing through the flimsy joy of the festival like wolves in a sheep pen. He saw one, a spider-like creature of solidified shadow, bearing down on a terrified group huddled behind an overturned bench. Naruto appeared before it, his hand outstretched. A spear of pure, golden light materialized in his grasp, and he hurled it. The spear pierced the Hoshikui, which dissolved with a silent scream, its darkness devoured by the light. He was a whirlwind of action, a beacon of hope in the spreading nightmare, but he was only one person. His mind was stretched thin, tracking Maki's powerful, kinetic energy as she carved a path through the western sector, and Nobara's sharp, percussive bursts of cursed power as she nailed curses from afar, her resonance technique perfectly suited for picking off targets in a crowd. Then, his senses screamed a warning. A new energy signature, far more powerful than the others, flared to life. It was near Maki. Another, almost as strong, appeared near Nobara. It was a trap. The lesser curses were a distraction, designed to separate them. Maki found herself facing an elite Hoshikui. It was larger, vaguely humanoid, and wielded a scythe made of frozen silence. It moved with a terrifying grace, its attacks not aimed at killing her, but at wearing her down. She was a master of physical combat, but her weapons, even her cursed tools, had their effects slightly dampened by the creature's void-based nature. She read a swing that would have decapitated her, the impact jarring her down to her bones. She was strong, but she was being pushed back. Miles away, Nobara was in a similar predicament. She was cornered in a narrow alley, facing a Hoshikui that could phase through solid matter, attacking her from the walls, the ground, anywhere. Her nails passed harmlessly through its shifting form. She was on the defensive, her brash confidence being eroded by a relentless, untouchable foe. Naruto, battling 3 of the lesser curses at once, felt their danger as a sharp, painful spike in his mind. He was too far. He couldn't get to both of them in time. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to find purchase in his heart. The thought of them being hurt, of failing them, was more terrifying than any curse. He made a choice. He roared, a sound of pure, defiant power. He slammed his fists together, and a shockwave of golden energy erupted from him, vaporizing the curses around him. He needed a moment of stillness. Focus, he told himself. He remembered his clones, the ones he had used against the Zenin. They were extensions of his will, but they were limited. He needed more. He needed to be in 2 places at once. He reached deeper into the sun within him, not for more power, but for more substance. He pulled on the very concept of his being, the essence of his daybreak manifestation, and split it. It was an act that felt like tearing his own soul in half. 2 figures of pure, golden light stepped out of his body. They weren't the simple, physical copies of his shadow clones. These were different. They were semi-sentient, glowing with an inner fire, their forms almost identical to his own. They were his will, his power, and his desire to protect, given form. Go, the real Naruto commanded, his voice strained. Protect them. The 2 light beings didn't respond. They simply vanished, streaking through the ruined festival grounds at impossible speeds, 2 golden comets on a mission. Maki grunted as the elite Hoshikui's side locked with her knife, the void energy of the blade starting to eat away at the cursed tool's steel. The creature was too strong, its power a direct counter to her physical world. Just as her arm was about to give way, a golden light slammed into the Hoshikui from the side, sending it staggering back. A luminous figure, glowing with the warm, familiar energy of Naruto, stood before her. Its hand outstretched. It had no face, just a smooth contour of light, but she knew what it was. It was him. He had sent a part of himself to save her. A wave of warmth, entirely unrelated to the light clone's energy, flooded her chest. In the alley, Nobara fired her last nail, which passed harmlessly through the phasing Hoshikui. The creature solidified, lunging for her. Saint as its claws were about to find her throat, a second golden figure appeared behind it, grabbing its shadowy form. The light clone's touch was anathema to it. The Hoshikui solidified completely, icking in pain as the pure energy burned it. Now, the light clone seemed to project into her mind. Nobara didn't hesitate. With the creature held fast, a solid target at last, she slammed a nail into her straw doll. Resonance. The Hoshikui convulsed and exploded, its link to the clone acting as a perfect conduit for her technique. She stood panting, staring at the Naruto of light, who gave her a silent nod before dissolving into motes of gold. Her heart was hammering in her chest, a frantic rhythm of fear, relief, and a startling, fierce surge of affection. He hadn't chosen. He had refused to choose. He had found a way to be there for both of them. With his partners safe, the real Naruto turned his attention to the true source of the attack. He could feel it now, a nexus of cursed energy at the city's center. Coordinating the assault, he shot into the sky, a streak of gold against the backdrop of fire and smoke. He landed on the roof of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building. Standing there, bathed in the chaotic light of the city below, was a figure in a dark, hooded robe. It was one of the Hoshikui, but it was different. It held a gnarled staff topped with a crystal that pulsed with a cold, dark light. It was the command unit. "You were in error," the Hoshikui said, its voice a chorus of whispers. "A bright, noisy mistake in the grand design. The Master's awakening is at hand. This world will be silenced. This attack was merely to test your limitations. You found them," Naruto said, his voice dangerously calm. "I don't have any." He didn't wait for a reply. He was done with tests, done with games. These things had hurt his friends, had turned a place of joy into a slaughterhouse. He moved, his body a golden blur, and appeared directly in front of the Hoshikui. He grabbed the staff. The crystal cracked under the pressure of his pure energy. The Hoshikui tried to dissolve, but Naruto's grip was absolute. Golden light crawled up his arm and onto the creature's body, burning it from the inside out. "This world isn't yours to silence," Naruto snarled, his eyes blazing with the fire of his soul. He clenched his fist, and the staff, along with the Hoshikui holding it, was annihilated in a silent, contained detonation of pure, sun-like energy. As its command unit was erased, the remaining Hoshikui across the city faltered, their coordination shattered. They dissolved into shadows and fled. The assault broken. Silence descended on the rooftop, broken only by the distant sirens. Naruto stood alone, breathing heavily, the effort of splitting his essence having taken a physical toll. He looked down at the city, at the fires and the chaos, and his victory felt hollow. He felt two presences arrive on the roof behind him. Maki and Nobara. They were bruised, their yukatas torn and dirty. But they were alive. They walked up to stand beside him, one on each side. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They stood together, the three of them, a silent, unshakable unit on that rooftop. Overlooking the wounded city. The fireworks were over. The lies of the sky had faded. All that was left was the hard, cold reality of their world, and the unspoken truth that now bound them together. They were his to protect. And he was theirs. In that shared, exhausted silence, the lines between friendship, loyalty, and love blurred into something new, something stronger. They were no longer just a team. They were a foundation, and none of them noticed the true purpose of the attack. Far to the south, on a remote, storm-lashed island, a small, elite team of Hoshikui, completely ignored by the Jujutsu world's focused response on Tokyo, approached a hidden, ancient Shinto shrine. Their target wasn't a city. It was a single, crumbling stone seal. While the world was distracted by the bright, chaotic battle in the sky, the true objective was achieved in silence and shadow. With a final, chilling crack, the seal broke. One of the great chains holding back the Star of Oblivion had been shattered. The whispers of Amatsu Mikabashi grew a little louder in the deep, dark places of the world. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Weight of the Scales. The aftermath of the Festival of Falling Stars, as the media dubbed it, was a frantic, city-wide cleanup operation. The official story was a gas line explosion coupled with mass hysteria. For the Jujutsu world, it was a terrifying escalation. The sheer scale and coordination of the Hoshikui attack were unprecedented. It was a declaration of war, and the higher-ups were scrambling, their usual glacial baroque sigh shattered by the undeniable truth that a new, intelligent enemy had emerged. In the center of this storm of panic and strategy sessions stood Naruto, Maki, and Nobara. They were debriefed, medically cleared, and then debriefed again. Their reports were chilling in their efficiency, detailing a level of teamwork that made the older sorcerers exchange uneasy glances. But it was Naruto's testimony that caused the most stir. His creation of two semi-sentient light constructs, beings of pure energy that acted independently to protect his comrades. It was a feat of cursed technique manipulation that bordered on the divine. A power far beyond the scope of any known system or classification. He was hailed as a hero, the savior of the city. For a few, fleeting days, the praise was unanimous. But in the shadows, another power was moving. A power that did not deal in heroes or villains, but only in numbers on a scale. The Equilibrium Council saw the festival attack not as a tragedy, but as exhibit D in their growing case against Naruto Uzumaki. Shinjuku had been a localized anomaly. The Zenin affair was a political disruption. The Hakone incident was a contained, special case mission. But, this was a citywide catastrophe directly attracted by his presence. In their cold, ruthless logic, Naruto's immense positive energy was a beacon for the equal and opposite force of the Hoshikui. He was not the solution. He was the source of the problem. His very existence was unbalancing the scales. The final piece of their argument was the destruction of the southern shrine, a fact they had discovered through their own secretive channels and had deliberately kept from Gojo. While the daybreak anomaly was distracted, a major seal had been broken. It was the perfect evidence. Naruto's recence created chaos that the enemy could exploit. He had to be removed from the board. The decree was issued in an emergency session, bypassing Gojo Satoru's authority through an ancient, rarely used charter designed for planet-level threats. The verdict was swift and absolute. Naruto Uzumaki, designated a phenomenon class threat. His existence is a catalyst for catastrophic events of a cosmic nature. By order of the Equilibrium Council, he is to be captured and sealed indefinitely within the prison realm. To carry out the sentence, they dispatched their most feared asset, the Purge Division. Not a force for fighting curses, but for hunting sorcerers. They were specialists in anti-jujutsu combat, equipped with cursed tools that disrupted techniques, barriers that nullified energy, and a chillingly pragmatic willingness to neutralize their own kind for the greater good. The attack came without warning. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Naruto was in the school's main courtyard, trying to teach an exasperated Maki the finer points of his instant W in rock-paper-scissors strategy, which mostly involved him claiming his son beats everything. Nobara was heckling them both from the sidelines, proclaiming his technique cheating. It was a moment of stolen peace, of easy camaraderie. Then the air changed. A dozen figures dropped from the rooftops surrounding the courtyard, landing in silent, perfect unison. They were clad in stark white uniforms with black, geometric patterns, their faces hidden behind porcelain masks featureless save for a single, vertical black line. The Purge Division. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted from playful to deadly. Naruto, Maki, and Nobara fell into a defensive triangle, their backs to each other. Naruto Uzumaki, the leader of the squad, said, his voice distorted and metallic through his mask. By order of the council, you are to surrender peacefully for immediate sealing. Resist, and we are authorized to use any force necessary. Naruto's eyes narrowed. The council? What council? You are a threat to the balance, the leader continued, ignoring his question. Your very light casts a shadow that threatens to consume the world. Nobara let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. A threat? He just saved thousands of lives. Are you insane? His actions led to the destruction of the Futsunushi Shrine and the release of a Class 0 artifact, the leader stated coldly. The cost of his heroism is too high. Surrender. The lie was seamless, calculated. They were pinning the shrine's destruction on him, twisting his victory into a failure. Maki hefted the quarterstaff she'd been training with, her knuckles white. You want him, you have to go through us. The leader tilted his head. Maki Zenin, a casualty of the old system. We can appreciate your frustration. Stand aside. This is not your fight. Our enemy is not tradition, but extremity. Your family was wrong to discard you, but this boy is an extreme they could never have imagined. Maki spat on the ground. I've had enough of old men in dark rooms telling me what's right. I choose my own side. The leader sighed, a sound of manufactured disappointment. So be it. He made a single hand gesture. 4 of the Purge members slammed cursed tools into the ground. They were black, obsidian-like rods that hummed with a negative energy. A translucent, gray dome shimmered into existence over the courtyard, cutting them off from the rest of the school. An inverted barrier. It wasn't designed to keep curses out, but to keep sorcerers in, dampening their cursed energy output. Naruto felt it immediately. The boundless ocean of his power was still there, but it felt like he was trying to access it through a thick, syrupy filter. The air grew heavy, sluggish. It weakens cursed techniques, Maki analyzed, her physical senses unaffected. Then it's a good thing I'm good at punching, Nobara growled, gripping her hammer. The fight began. The Purge Division moved with the terrifying, synchronized grace of a predator pack. They didn't use flashy techniques. They used strategy. 2 members engaged Maki, their cursed tools not weapons, but whips of hardened shadow that sought to bind and disarm rather than injure. Another 2 went for Nobara, deploying small, flying curses that exploded into clouds of sticky, energy-sapping webbing. The remaining 8 focused entirely on Naruto. This was a battle unlike any he had ever fought. It wasn't about overwhelming power. It was about restraint. He could unleash a solar flare and atomize the entire squad, the barrier, and a good chunk of the school. But they were human. They were sorcerers, misguided and fanatical, but not evil in the way a curse was. He refused to kill them. So he fought defensively. He was a phantom of golden light, weaving between their coordinated attacks. He parried strikes from cursed tools designed to drain his energy on contact, the blades sizzling as they met his skin but failing to draw blood. He used his light constructs not as weapons, but as tools, a flash of blinding light to disorient a group, a solid wall to block a pincer movement, a clone to intercept a capture net mid-flight. He was disarming them, one by one. A precise kick sent a sorcerer's weapon flying. A quick jab to a pressure point caused a man's arm to go limp. He was a blur of controlled, non-lethal force. But there were too many of them. And their teamwork was flawless. For every one he incapacitated, 2 more would adjust their formation to cover the gap. Maki was a whirlwind of controlled fury. Without the need for cursed energy. The barrier didn't affect her physical prowess. She was in her element, her staff a blur as she deflected the shadow whips, using her superior strength and skill to keep her opponents on the back foot. But they were experts, and they were forcing her into a battle of attrition. Nobara was struggling the most. Her resonance technique was heavily dampened by the barrier. Her nails, when they hit, had a fraction of their usual impact. She was forced to rely on her hammer and her wits, turning the courtyard into a mess of cleverly placed traps, using loose gravel and debris as improvised projectiles. She was holding her own through sheer grit, but she was being cornered. A Purge member managed to tag Naruto's leg with an energy-draining chain. It clung to him like a leech, the gray metal glowing as it tried to siphon his power. It was like trying to drain the ocean with a teacup. The chain glowed white-hot and then melted, but the distraction was enough. Another Gent fired a projectile, a dart attached to a thin, almost invisible wire. Naruto moved to dodge, but the dart wasn't aimed at him. It was aimed at Nobara. His eyes widened. He had to choose. Defend high. MSELF from the 3 agents closing in on him, or save Nobara from an attack she couldn't see. It wasn't a choice. He moved, a golden streak across the courtyard, appearing in front of Nobara just as the dart arrived. It struck him in the shoulder, a sharp, cold sting. He grunted, pulling it out. The wire attached to it glowed with a sickly purple light. Neurotoxin, he analyzed, his own internal energy already working to neutralize the foreign substance. And a cursed energy suppressant. Got you, the Purge leader said, a hint of triumph in his metallic voice. It was a feint. The dart was never the main attack. As Naruto was distracted, 2 more agents appeared behind him, each holding one half of a circular cursed tool. They slammed the 2 halves together around his torso, and a wave of pure, anti-energy washed over him. It was the most profoundly violating sensation he had ever felt. It wasn't pain. It was nothingness. The warm, radiant sun inside him was snuffed out, not extinguished, but severed. He was cut off from his power completely. For the first time since he could remember, he was just a normal human. The sudden absence was dizzying, terrifying. He stumbled, his knees buckling. Naruto, Nobara and Maki screamed in unison. The Purge members swarmed him, chains and capture devices at the ready. This was it, the moment of capture. And then, the sky went dark. Not the darkness of night, but a sudden, unnatural blotting out of the sun. Dozens of crows descended upon the courtyard, a shrieking, chaotic cloud of black feathers and sharp beaks. They swarmed the Purge division, not attacking to kill, but to create chaos. They pecked at masks, tangled in wires, and their sheer numbers broke the squad's perfect formation. On the roof of the main school building, a figure stood silhouetted against the sky, her long silver hair whipping in the wind she had created. Mei Mei. In her hand was her colossal battle axe. My, her voice, amplified by cursed energy, boomed across the courtyard. It seems a private party is being held, and I wasn't invited. How rude. She had been in a meeting with Gojo when the barrier went up. While he had gone to confront the higher-ups directly, she had chosen a more direct intervention. Mei Mei-san. The Purge leader snarled, his mask now cracked from a crow's beak. This is official council business. Stand down, or you will be branded a traitor. Mei Mei laughed, a sound as sharp and clear as a silver bell. The council, she said with theatrical disdain, recently defaulted on a payment they owed me. As such, N.Y. and all contracts I had with them are null and void. She pointed her axe down at the chaos below. However, I have a new, very exclusive client. And his portfolio is performing spectacularly. She leapt from the roof. She didn't fall. She plummeted, her axe leading the way. She landed in the center of the courtyard with the force of a meteor, the ground cracking around her. The force of her Nding sent a shockwave that shattered the inverted barrier's projector rods. The gray dome dissolved, sunlight, and power, flooded back into the courtyard. The connection to Naruto's inner sun was restored with a sudden, explosive rush. Like a dam breaking, a torrent of golden energy erupted from him, shattering the capture device around his torso and sending the surrounding purge members flying. He rose to his feet, his body glowing, his eyes burning with a cold, righteous fury. The neurotoxin was burned out of his system in a flash of steam. He looked at Nobara's worried face, at Maki's fierce, protective stance, and at Mei Mei, who gave him a sharp, business-like nod. These people had stood against their entire world for him. I tried to be gentle, Naruto said, his voice dangerously low. He made the cross-seal hand sign. A dozen shadow clones appeared, each one glowing with the same intensity as the original. Let's end this. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted another 30 seconds. With Naruto's full power restored and Mei Mei's overwhelming offensive presence, it was a rout. Maki and Nobara, no longer hampered, worked with Mei Mei to systematically and brutally disable the squad. While Naruto and his clones moved like ghosts, ensuring no one was permanently injured, but leaving no one standing. The last one left was the leader. He stood alone, his mask shattered, revealing a young, fanatical face. He was terrified, but resolute. You are an imbalance, he screamed, charging at Naruto with a final, desperate attack. Before he could take 2 steps, an invisible force slammed into him. And he froze, suspended a millimeter off the ground. Now, a familiar, playful voice echoed from the school's entrance. Is that any way to treat my favorite student? Gojo Satoru stood there, his blindfold on, a cheerful smile on his face that did not match the arctic coldness of his cursed energy. He had dealt with the council, or rather, he had reminded them why even they did not dare to cross him. He casually flicked a finger, and the frozen purge leader was sent flying, landing in an unconscious heap with the rest of his squad. Gojo surveyed the scene, the defeated elite unit, the 4 defiant figures standing together, the lingering scent of ozone and crow feathers. An internal review, he announced to the courtyard at large, has found the Ekili Brium Council's decree to be procedurally flawed. All orders are rescinded. My apologies for the disturbance. He looked at Naruto, Maki, Nobara, and Mei Mei, and his smile became genuine. Excellent work, team. Top marks for repelling hostile takeovers. The crisis was over, but the schism was now a chasm. The secret war within Jujutsu society was now out in the open. The council had made their move and failed. They wouldn't get a second chance, not while Gojo was watching. But the seeds of distrust had been sown. Later that evening, the 4 of them sat on the steps of the main building, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a quiet, bone-deep weariness. Mei Mei, ever the pragmatist, was on her phone, calculating the damages and emotional distress compensation she would be invoicing the council. But she sat with them, a part of their weary circle. Nobara leaned her head on Naruto's shoulder. They really tried to seal you, she murmured. The earlier bravado gone, replaced by a quiet horror. They failed, Maki stated, her voice firm. She was checking the edge of a new blade, but her presence was a comforting, solid weight beside them. Naruto looked at the 3 of them. The rebel warrior who defied her clan for him. The unbreakable hammer who stood by him even when her own power failed. The cunning strategist Who had turned her back on a fortune to stand on his side. He had been called an imbalance, a threat, a catalyst for chaos. Maybe they were right, but as he looked at the fiercely loyal, powerful women flanking him, he realized he didn't care. If being a threat to the balance meant having people like this in his life, people who would fight the world for him, then he would gladly unbalance the whole damn world. This was his side. This was his team. This was his family. Yeah, Naruto said softly, putting an arm around Nobara's shoulders and giving a grateful nod towards Maki and Mei Mei. They failed, and in that moment, he made a silent vow. He would not just be their protector. He would be their pillar. He would become so strong that no council, no clan, no god, could ever threaten their peace again. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. Echoes of the Void. The failed capture attempt on Naruto shattered the fragile peace of the Jujutsu world. The Equilibrium Council, publicly humiliated and strong-armed by a furious Gojo Satoru, retreated into the shadows, their authority broken but their convictions hardened. They had lost the battle, but their belief that Naruto was a harbinger of doom was now an unshakable, fanatical certainty. The entire power structure of Jujutsu society was now a cold war, with Gojo and his students on one side, and the whispering, resentful traditionalists on the other. But while the humans were consumed by their internal politics, the true enemy had not been idle. The destruction of the Futsunushi Shrine, which the council had tried to use as political ammunition, was a far more catastrophic event than anyone but Gojo understood. The seal hadn't just held back an artifact, it had been one of three primary anchors caging a direct shard of Amatsu Mikabashi's being. A sliver of its primordial consciousness. The Hoshikui had used the chaos of the Purge Division's attack, the one moment when every powerful sorcerer was focused on Tokyo Jujutsu High, to break the second of the three great seals. This one was hidden deep in the Japanese Alps, a place of ancient power and unforgiving nature, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. The awakening was not a sudden explosion. It was a creeping, silent cancer. It began at the epicenter of the broken seal, a forgotten, snow-blasted peak. The temperature began to drop. Not the natural cold of the mountains, but a deep, penetrating cold that leached the warmth from stone and sky alike. The air grew still. The hardy alpine birds fell silent. The wind itself seemed to die. Within hours, a new weather pattern appeared on meteorological charts, a perfectly circular storm system over the Alps that baffled scientists. It wasn't snowing. It wasn't raining. It was a vortex of absolute stillness that was expanding at an alarming rate. Gojo Satoru felt it first. A void spot on his mental map of the world, a patch of reality that his six eyes couldn't properly perceive. It was a hole in the universe. A stain of non-existence that was actively, aggressively growing. An emergency summons brought Naruto, Maki, Nobara, and Mei Mei to the main strategy room. A massive, satellite-enhanced map of Japan dominated one wall, a pulsing, sickly purple circle centered on the northern Alps. "What is that?" Nobara asked, her voice tight. "A typhoon. Worse," Gojo said, his expression more grim than any of them had ever seen. "It's a domain. A naturally forming, continental-scale domain expansion. Or the precursor to one." He pointed at the circle. "At the center of that is a cursed spirit of unimaginable power." One of the Hoshikui broke a seal while the council was busy trying to put Naruto in a box. "This is the result." Mei Mei, who had flown one of her crows to the edge of the phenomenon, looked pale. "My crow didn't even get close. It wasn't destroyed. It just stopped. Its connection to me was severed. It's not dead. It's just not there anymore. Its cursed technique is absolute zero," Gojo stated, his voice low and grave. "It's not cold in the thermal sense. It's the cessation of all motion. All energy. Molecular, kinetic, spiritual. It creates pockets of true void, erasing whatever it touches from existence. That circle is its area of effect. It's currently covering half of Nagano Prefecture, and it's expanding by a kilometer every 10 minutes. If we don't stop it, it will consume Honshu in a day." A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. This wasn't a curse to be exorcised. This was a natural disaster on a cosmic scale. A force that could erase a country from the map. "So what's the plan?" Maki asked, her voice steady as ever, her hand resting on the hilt of a sheathed katana at her waist. "How do we fight something that erases things?" "We can't," Gojo said flatly. 99% of all cursed techniques, mine included, are useless. Any attack we throw at it will lose all its kinetic and cursed energy and simply cease to exist the moment it enters that field." He looked at Naruto. With one exception, all eyes turned to him. "My power is positive energy," Naruto said, understanding immediately. "The conceptual opposite of void. It's the only thing that won't be negated." "Exactly," Gojo confirmed. "This isn't just a fight. It's a battle of fundamental concepts. Existence versus non-existence. Life versus silence. You, Naruto, are our only win condition. But you can't do it alone. The being at the center, let's call it the Herald, is a direct shard of Amatsu Mikabashi's will. It's a special grade of a classification that doesn't even exist yet. It will have its own defenses. Its own constructs. That's where you all come in. The plan was desperate, simple, and horrifically dangerous. Gojo, as the strongest, would take on the most difficult task. He would fly to the edge of the expanding field and use his own technique, Infinity, to halt its growth. He couldn't push it back, but he could create a state of equilibrium, a stalemate, buying them precious time. The rest of them, Naruto, Maki, Nobara, and Mei Mei, would be their strike team. They would fly into the heart of the storm, to the epicenter, and face the Herald directly. This is insane, Nobara muttered. But there was a fierce, determined glint in her eyes. Let's do it. The flight into the storm was like a descent into hell's frozen heart. The helicopter vibrated violently, not from turbulence, but from the very laws of physics starting to fray at the edges. Outside the windows, the world was a uniform, featureless gray. There was no up or down, no sky or ground. Mei Mei was their pilot, her face a mask of intense concentration. Maki sat beside Naruto, checking the edge of her blade, a custom-forged katana made from a cursed tool alloy that could hold a charge. Nobara was on his other side, nervously tapping her hammer against her palm. Naruto closed his eyes, his hands resting on Maki's katana and Nobara's hammer. A warm, golden light flowed from him, suffusing the metal. He wasn't just pouring energy into them, he was imbuing them with the concept of his daybreak power. He was turning their weapons into temporary extensions of his own anomaly. It might not be much, he said, but it should allow your attacks to exist inside its field. At least for a moment. Maki gripped her newly glowing blade. It felt warm, alive in her hands. Nobara looked at her hammer, which now had faint, golden runes glowing on its head. She gave Naruto a sharp, confident nod. We're approaching the epicenter, Mei Mei called out from the cockpit. The air is getting thick. Get ready. The helicopter landed with a jarring thud on a plateau that should have been covered in snow but was instead bare, black rock. The moment the ramp lowered, the cold hit them. It was a profound, soul-deep chill that had nothing to do with temperature. It was the feeling of life being unwound. They stepped out into a landscape of nightmare. The sky was a roiling canvas of purple and black. The ground was littered with the frozen, statue-like forms of animals, a deer, a bear, a flock of birds, caught mid-motion, their life force simply erased. In the center of the plateau, a fissure of black energy pulsed. A wound in the world. And from it, a figure was rising. It was a being of sublime terror, vaguely feminine in shape but composed entirely of fractured obsidian and shimmering, solidified void. Its limbs were too long, its movements disjointed, and where its face should have been, there was only a smooth, reflective surface that mirrored their own horrified expressions. This was Yakumo, the Herald of the Void. As it rose to its full, towering height, the ground around it cracked. From these cracks, lesser creatures crawled out, constructs of the same void stuff, shaped like wolves and great swooping birds of prey. They were the Herald's antibodies, its immune system against the infection of life. Mei Mei, Nobara, the constructs are yours, Naruto commanded, his voice ice sharp and clear against the crushing silence. Maki, with me, we're going straight for the Herald. Mei Mei leapt into the fray, her massive axe, now also glowing with a faint golden light from Naruto's touch, swinging in a devastating arc. She was a silver-haired whirlwind of destruction, her battle cry a defiant roar against the silence. Each swing of her axe didn't just cleave a void construct in two. It left a trail of positive energy that caused them to destabilize and dissolve. Nobara moved with tactical precision, her charged hammer slamming nails into the ground. Hairpin, she yelled, activating a chain reaction. The cursed energy, protected by Naruto's blessing, erupted, catching a pack of void wolves in a multi-point explosion. She was their artillery, picking off targets and controlling the battlefield. That left Naruto and Maki to face the Herald. They charged. Maki, with her superhuman speed, was a blur, her glowing katana a streak of gold. Naruto was right beside her, his fists wreathed in sun fire. Yakumo watched them approach, its faceless head tilting with an unnerving, inhuman curiosity. It raised a hand, and a wall of pure void, a curtain of absolute nothingness, erupted from the ground in front of it. Maki, trusting Naruto completely, didn't slow down. Just before they hit the wall, Naruto slammed his palms together. A shockwave of golden light, shaped like a battering ram, shot forward, striking the void wall. It didn't break it. The two concepts met, existence and non-existence, and annihilated each other in a silent, violent flash of light and shadow. The path was clear. Maki shot through the gap, her blade striking the herald's torso. The sound was like 1,000 panes of glass shattering. The charged katana, powered by her immense strength, managed to gouge a deep wound in the herald's form. But the void stuff immediately began to flow back, sealing the wound. The herald retaliated. It moved with a speed that defied its size, its long, obsidian arms swinging at Maki. Naruto intercepted, catching the blow on his forearms. The impact sent a shockwave that cracked the very stone beneath their feet. He was driven back, a grunt of pain escaping his lips. The herald's physical strength was immense. It regenerates, Maki yelled, dodging a follow-up strike that left a trench in the ground where she had been. We can't out-damage it. Then we don't attack the body. Naruto shouted back, his mind racing. He could feel it, the same way he had felt the logic of Naobito's technique and the nature of the curse in Hakone. The herald wasn't a living being. It was a conduit, a walking gateway for the concept of absolute zero. The body was just a shell. The real enemy was the cursed technique itself. Gojo can only hold the line for so long, he thought, a desperate plan forming in his mind. We can't win a battle of attrition. We have to end this. Now. He looked at Maki, his eyes blazing with a fierce, unwavering light. I need to do something. It's going to be big. I need you to buy me 30 seconds. Can you do it? Maki didn't hesitate. She gave him a single, sharp nod, her expression one of absolute trust. Just be ready. She turned to face the herald alone. Hey, you faceless freak. She roared, channeling every ounce of her will, every bit of her defiance against the clan that scorned her, into her voice. Come and get me. She became a dervish of steel and fury. She knew she couldn't kill it, so she didn't try. She fought to distract, to harass, to survive. She was a gnat buzzing around a titan, her glowing blade, leaving 100 shallow cuts that healed as quickly as they were made. She dodged, she weaved, she parried, her body a testament to a lifetime of brutal training. She was buying time with her blood and her spirit. Behind her, Naruto stood still. He closed his eyes, and the golden aura around him receded, pulling inward. All of his power, all of his being, focused on a single point in his soul. He was reaching for something he had never dared to touch before. He had shown glimpses of it, used facets of it, but he had never, ever unleashed its true form. His domain expansion. The world around him began to change. The oppressive, sickly purple of the sky began to lighten. The profound, soul-leeching cold was pushed back by a rising, inexorable warmth. Yakumo, the herald, felt it. It faltered in its attack on Maki, its faceless head snapping towards Naruto. It recognized the threat, a power antithetical to its very existence, preparing to manifest on a conceptual level. It abandoned Maki, raising both of its arms to unleash its full power, a wave of absolute erasure, at Naruto. Naruto! Maki screamed, trying to intercept. She was too late, but it didn't matter. Domain expansion, Naruto said, his voice a calm, quiet echo that seemed to resound across the entire plateau. Unending horizon of the dawn. The world dissolved. The black rock, the purple sky, the void constructs. The herald itself. Everything was washed away, replaced by pure, brilliant light. They were no longer on a mountain. They were standing on a boundless, featureless plain of gold, under a sky that was a perpetual, magnificent sunrise. The air was warm, humming with a gentle, life-giving energy. It smelled of clean rain and fresh-cut grass. This was not a trapping domain like Megumi's or a surefire hit domain like Gojo's. It was a reality override. A domain that did not impose a rule upon the world, but replaced a patch of the world with its own fundamental rule: life endures. Maki, Nobara, and Mei Mei stood panting in the golden light, their wounds knitting closed, their cursed energy restored to its peak. The void constructs had simply vanished, unable to exist in a reality made of pure positive energy. Only one other being remained, Yakumo. The herald of the void stood alone on the golden plain, its form flickering and unstable. It was anathema, a creature of shadow in a world of pure light. The domain wasn't attacking it. Its very nature was eroding the herald's existence. And in the center of it all stood Naruto. But it wasn't just him. Behind him, looming like a mountain, was a colossal avatar made of pure, condensed sunlight, a giant of golden energy with a calm, serene face. It was the ultimate expression of his power, his soul-given form. The herald let out a silent, psychic scream of rage and fear. It gathered all of its remaining power, the concept of absolute zero, into a single, concentrated sphere of perfect blackness. It was a bomb of pure nothingness, designed to punch a hole in reality itself. It hurled it at Naruto. The golden avatar moved. It raised a hand, its motion slow, deliberate, and inexorable. It did not block the sphere of void. It simply closed its hand around it. The blackness struggled against the golden light for a single, eternal moment. And then, it was snuffed out, like a candle flame in a hurricane. The herald was spent. Its form flickered violently, its connection to the void severed by the overwhelming reality of the domain. But before it was erased, its consciousness, the shard of Amatsu Mikabashi, reached out one last time, lashing directly into Naruto's mind. It didn't speak in words. It showed him. It showed him a time before time, a universe of perfect, silent, cold stillness. The great silence. Then, it showed him a flaw, a mistake. A spontaneous, inexplicable eruption of energy, of life, of warmth. The daybreak. It was the original sin that introduced the concepts of pain, fear, emotion, and struggle into a perfect universe. It showed him that the Hoshikui, Amatsu Mikabashi, they were not conquerors. They were healers, trying to correct a cosmic error, to return the universe to its proper, peaceful state of non-existence. You were the mistake. The herald's thoughts echoed in his soul. Your power is the source of all suffering. We offer a mercy you cannot comprehend. We offer peace. The golden avatar's Han-D descended upon the flickering form of the herald. There was no violence, no explosion. The herald of the void was simply unmade. Its obsidian form dissolved into the golden light of the domain, its energy purified, its concept erased. The unending horizon held for a moment longer, then gently faded. They were back on the mountain plateau. The purple sky was gone, replaced by a clear, blue afternoon. The unnatural cold had vanished. The wind began to blow again, fresh and clean. Far on the horizon, they could see the colossal, shimmering form of Gojo's infinity barrier dissolving, his role complete. They had won. Naruto collapsed to his knees, sweat pouring down his face, his body trembling from the sheer exertion of maintaining such a reality-altering technique. Maki was at his side in an instant, supporting him. Nobara and Mei Mei rushed over, forming a protective circle around him. He was exhausted, but he was alive. And he was changed. The herald's final message had shaken him to his core. He had always seen his power as a force for good, a light in the darkness. But what if the darkness saw itself as peace? What if his light was the true source of the world's pain? He looked at his friends gathered around him. Maki's fierce loyalty, Nobara's defiant spirit, Mei Mei's sharp, unwavering support. He felt their warmth, their life, their chaotic, beautiful, messy existence. Peace. The herald's peace was the silence of the grave. His peace, Naruto decided, was this. The sound of his friends breathing, the feeling of Maki's hand on his shoulder, the sight of the sun on the horizon. If his power was the mistake that allowed for this, then he would be the greatest mistake the universe had ever seen. He would not just be a beacon. He would be a firestorm. And he would burn away any peace that threatened his world. Chapter 6 End.